What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into TTP Sports. And over the craziness of the past 24 hours, yesterday it was all Phillies focus, but we all know what the major storyline from yesterday morning was, and that was the Flyers canning John Tortorella basically a couple of days after when they got embarrassed by the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he came out in postgame saying that I have no interest in coaching this type of team for this type of season, and the writing was basically on the wall for John Tortorella, even though that specific comment was not the full reason why he got fired. There's definitely a plenty of other reasons why. Danny Briere did speak at 5 p.m. yesterday before the Flyers played the Montreal Canadiens, and the Flyers did win last night against Montreal. Matvei Michkov looked very good. The team looked very energized, but there's also some things coming from last night's game because Cam York got benched once again for disciplinary reasons, so something had to have happened between Cam York and John Tortorella, and also that could be one of the many reasons why he got fired. And like I said, Danny Briere explained a lot of it yesterday. There's also an article from Anthony DeMarco from the Daily Faceoff that explains a lot to possibly why John Tortorella got fired. It's a whole complete crazy story right here. I wouldn't even want to describe it as a mess, but it kind of does feel like a mess just because of the way that Torts has been acting for the past couple of weeks. It's just crazy. Didn't expect it to get to this point. Most Flyers fans really expected that John Tortorella would last throughout the rest of this season, and whether he would move up into an advisory role or whether he would retire after this year. I didn't expect him to be the head coach of the Flyers next season. I expected, two of those options that I just brought up. I didn't expect him to get fired before the season even, ended, and basically just throwing away the possible advisory role that he probably could have been, because that's something that has been talked about the past couple of years with John Tortorella, that he doesn't like going into the final year of a contract, without an extension in place or some other plan in place. So there was something that was going to be different behind the Flyers bench next year. And like I said, I did not expect John Tortorella to get fired before the season ended, but here we are. John Tortorella is fired. Granted, that is yesterday's news, but there's still a lot of other things that are coming about from yesterday, from, all the stuff behind the scenes possibly with John Tortorella, and a lot of things that are dealing with Cam York specifically from his benching last night. So it's crazy. It's definitely a lot of crazy things here. So before we get into the rest of everything here, if you are new to the channel, I definitely recommend that you do hit that subscribe button. Does me a very great deal of service with the YouTube algorithm. You can also use the code TTPSPORTS, $20 off your first purchase at SEATGEEK. It is a great deal. Do not pass it up, especially with Philly season just starting. Get yourself some tickets down to Citizens Bank Park. It's a great deal. Don't pass it up. Maybe get yourself to a couple of final Flyers home games to see a team that may be more energized without Torts. Maybe they possibly ruin their tank. So who knows? Who knows? But it's a great deal. Don't pass it up. You can also follow on TikTok and Instagram at TTP Sports for reels, shorts, and all that good stuff. So basically getting into the business today, like I said, yesterday's news in yesterday morning basically, and I was expecting yesterday to be very easy day, very calm, chilled day, just waiting for first pitch for Phillies opening day. No, around 9 a.m. and I am the idiot that doesn't turn my phone on in the morning, or I leave it on the charger and just basically ignore it. That was my fault because I didn't pay attention to my phone at 9 in the morning. I didn't open my phone until like 10:30. I get a bunch of notifications and a bunch of text messages about John Tortorella getting fired. It's a bunch of ESPN notifications, a text from my father, text from Brodes, text from Russ, and all that stuff. I'm like, oh my God. This is what happens when I don't pay attention to my phone early in the morning. So that's how I found out John Tortorella got fired, and then basically just looking through all the different ramifications, just going from his comments from Tuesday night's loss in Toronto, 7-2 loss, might I add, where the team just completely looked, they were getting crushed, they were getting destroyed, they were getting embarrassed. Cam York gets benched within the first 3 minutes of the game and doesn't play the rest of it. It was just bad. It was just bad. And then basically the icing on the cake is when he comes out in the post-game press conference and says that I have no interest in coaching this style of team for this, point in the season. And that basically I would say is the writing on the wall. And and like I said, that is not the full extent of why John Tortorella got fired. That probably just put more more wood into the fire at that point for, I guess the annoyance that John Tortorella has been with the Philadelphia Flyers for the past couple of weeks, because it does seem like, and it does sound like, that things have been boiling over, and Danny Briere did express a lot of that in his press conference yesterday afternoon or yesterday evening, talking about firing John Tortorella, saying that, there have been things for the past couple of years that would have warranted John Tortorella getting fired, but those are things that we worked about and worked through and found a way to pull through it. But there have been things in the past couple of weeks, the past couple of days, that have just been too much, that have just been, and I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but that have just been too much to deal with, that really just cannot be ignored, and we cannot go through this. And it just came to the decision that we had to fire John Tortorella and let him go. And it's funny too, because there were a couple of tweets before the Flyers put out their official statement in the afternoon about John Tortorella being fired. There was a couple of posts from like Elliot Friedman, from a bunch of other NHL sources and all that stuff, talking about that John Tortorella stepped down, actually. But no, the Flyers came out themselves and saying, no, he did not step down. We fired John Tortorella. So not basically just kicking his ass out the door at that point. And, Danny Briere putting his foot down, basically. And it was a full statement from Danny Briere that the Flyers did release. And it was saying, it was a hard thing to do, but, for the betterment of this organization, we had to fire John Tortorella. And that's basically what it was. And it really just does stem down to the past couple of weeks, and there is an article that I do have up here from Anthony DeMarco that probably does summarize probably what was going on within the Flyers organization, probably since the trade deadline, about John Tortorella just completely going all over the place, and why he probably got fired. And you can also throw into this situation with Cam York, because it does sound like those two got into some type of yelling, altercation or something like that, because Kevin Kurtz posted it this morning, saying that, told from a team source, that it's fair to say something happened between Cam York and John Tortorella in Toronto that contributed to the coach's dismissal on Thursday morning. Was put to me that they probably both crossed the line. So I do think someone reiterated this tweet in saying that there was no type of physical altercation between the two. It was most likely just entirely verbal, and they both crossed the line at some point, and that, part of the reason what led to John Tortorella being fired, and also what led to Cam York being basically benched in the game against Montreal, even though he was dressed and he was on the Flyers bench. He didn't play in the game. He took warm-ups and all that stuff. He came out for intermissions to warm-ups and all that, but he didn't play in the game. He basically was only dressed because the Flyers only had 6 defensemen available, so they played yesterday's game against Montreal with 5 defensemen. So there, and Brad Shaw came out post-game last night, didn't really explain to full detail of why Cam York was benched. He basically just said it was a disciplinary reasoning on why he was benched, and he left it at that. So, yeah, definitely reads a lot there on Cam York. I know, him and John Tortorella definitely haven't been seeing eye to eye, I would say, since Torts has been here and since Cam York has been up with the Flyers organization. There's been a bunch of things this year, Cam York about, especially some quotes that Cam York said about this year about Tortorella with, how Torts really doesn't explain things to him, and I don't play for Torts, I play for my teammates and all that stuff. So, I don't know with Cam York. It's been a weird year for him. He had a good year last year, but a lot of things just feel like it's writing on the wall with him, and I would not be shocked. And he's also going into a contract year. He is an RFA at the end of the season. I personally would not be shocked if Cam York is traded in this offseason. I really would not be shocked at that in the slightest, because there are some words going about within the Flyers organization, or just sources in general, talking about the contract negotiations going on between the Flyers and Cam York's camp. They're not even close on a number. Not even close. The Flyers value Cam York at a specific number, and the number that Cam York probably has that he's trying to offer the Flyers and trying to convince the Flyers with, it's kind of a little bit outrageous. And definitely not a number worthy for Cam York, personally. You just can't. It just can't. It's not acceptable. You cannot pay Cam York what is rumored to be asking him. I don't know what the number is specifically, but I heard it's very egregious, from what's coming on from the inside. So I really would not be shocked if Cam York's not a Flyer next season. And that really just goes down to the previous Flyers regime with Chuck Fletcher and all that stuff. And a lot of people want to put the blame on Briere and Jones for a lot of these guys, failing out and all that stuff. Cam York has nothing to do with Danny Briere and Keith Jones in this version of the regime. That goes back to Chuck Fletcher and all that stuff. And the multiple times in that 2019 first round of the draft that you had multiple chances to select Cole Caulfield, a guy that scored 100 plus goals in one season in his draft year. You passed on him twice. The draft Cam York. You moved down in the draft and still had a chance. The draft Cole Caulfield. You chose Cam York instead. Cole Caulfield's a key contributor for the Montreal Canadiens and is going to be a key contributor for them for years and years and years and years to come. And Cam York really hasn't turned into much. Really has not turned into much. You really hoped he would be a top 4 defenseman at this point. Possibly could be a quarterback on a power play. Hasn't really turned into that. And what he's asking for with that contract extension and in in the talks, not good. Not good. Not good at all. So I wouldn't be shocked if he's not a Flyer next season. I don't know what they would trade him for. I don't know what possibly could happen there. Do you just swap defensemen or something like that? Do you try to put Cam York into a trade to maybe acquire a center? I don't know. I don't know. All I could tell you is I probably would not be shocked if Cam York's a Flyer not a Flyer next season. I'd be more shocked if they extended him. That's basically where I'm at with this point with Cam York. So, just really shows to you how terrible that draft was for the Flyers and not selecting Cole Caulfield. Now, jokingly, you could say, oh, if you didn't draft Cole Caulfield, you probably wouldn't be in a position to draft Matvei Michkov. It's probably true and not true at the end of the day, but still, when you have a chance to go get really good talent, you probably should go draft him. And this is not a situation where, oh, he's too short. Short guys are not going to be successful in the NHL, blah, 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 blah. When there's talent on the board, I don't fucking care how big they are. I don't. If they're talented enough to play in the NHL, if they're talented enough to be a star in the NHL, you take that risk. You took the risk with Matvei Michkov, and look what he has been like. He's been very, very, very effective, regardless of how Torts treats him. Almost had a hat trick last night if he didn't hit the post on the empty net, which was a very hilarious aftermath on that. Konechny pass, drops it back to Michkov, entering the zone at the end of the game. Michkov has the wide open net, rings it off the post, goes into the corner, he falls over, and then he's so pissed with himself, he tries to go down the tunnel before the final horn even sounds, but then he realizes, oh, okay, the game's over, we won, I gotta go freaking celebrate with my teammates. Funny stuff. Definitely funny stuff there. But, yeah, just Cole Caulfield, Cam York, definitely a major miss right there. But I do want to go to this article right here from Anthony DeMarco, just to basically summarize to you what possibly has transpired with the Flyers and John Tortorella over the past few weeks and maybe what led to his firing. So let me bring this up right here for you guys. So we'll not bring it up on stream. I'm trying to bring it up right in front of my face, and I'm trying to close it down a little bit so it's not too gigantic on the stream on my screen right here. So I'm going to start halfway through the article because I think that's where basically the best of this thing comes here from Anthony DeMarco of the Daily Faceoff. So I'm going to start right here. But all good things must come to an end, and that was exactly the case for Tortorella as the 2024-2025 season began to wind down. In the bottom of the Metropolitan Division and have given up 7 goals in back-to-back games, the Flyers were in a tough sledding down towards the finish line. After Tortorella's comments following the drubbing loss of the Toronto Maple Leafs Tuesday night, it was clear that things were taking a toll on the 66-year-old. While Tortorella's comments were not the only thing that led to his dismissal, it was a series of things over the last couple of weeks, as Briere alluded to in his press conference ahead of Thursday night's game versus the Montreal Canadiens, that contributed to the eventual firing. So what exactly got us to this point? If we want to look more at tangible on-ice results, it's hard to have asked any more from Tortorella, especially after last season's overachieving year that saw the Flyers narrowly miss out on the playoff berth, and it is hard to argue that any other bench boss could have done more with that Flyers roster, especially following the trade of defenseman Sean Walker and the injury to Rasmus Ristolainen. The Flyers being able to stay in the hunt until the final days of last year's regular season was indicative of Tortorella's positive impact. This year, the Flyers struggled to play in the playoff picture virtually all season, having their postseason aspirations completely plummet during the turn of the calendar to 2025. Tortorella knew what he signed up for 3 years ago when he jumped on board, but the losing this year took a toll on him, one source told the Daily Faceoff. The first year was a new challenge for him in weeding out the bad apples. Last season was a positive surprise that saw the Flyers battle for a playoff spot in meaningful games down to the last game of the season. This year's story was different. The Flyers fell out of the playoff picture in the weeks leading up to the trade deadline. Briere and management leaned into the rebuilding philosophy, moving on from roster players like Joel Farabee, Morgan Frost, Eric Johnson, and Scott Lawton to stockpile assets and draft picks with eyes on the future. While Tortorella publicly said he favored this rebuild approach, it became clear that it was taking a toll on him. According to a source, a series of consistent events since the trade deadline led to Tortorella's eventual dismissal, becoming increasingly combative with everybody in the organization, from management to coaches to players to staff. Tortorella's antics wore on everybody. While his comments following Tuesday's game versus the Leafs were not the sole reason for his firing, behavior in that vein became far too common. Tortorella did not step down. He was let go by the Flyers, but his behavior following the trade deadline led some to believe that the third-year bench boss was almost looking to get fired, a source told Daily Faceoff. That is very inductive right there of John Tortorella, my God. So it really just sounds like this guy was trying to get fired over the past couple of weeks. He basically just said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm doing anything I can for you guys to fire me. Like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm hitting the old dusty trail at this point. That's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like. He really just was trying to get fired. That's what it says it right here in the article. Like the past few weeks, it's just been he's just been all over the place. And I got, people telling me that it basically, yeah, that's true. Was all over the place the past few weeks, and it was just to a boiling point for the Flyers organization. They just had to fire him. So want to look more into the article right here. As for what the initial plan leading up to the deadline, it was for Tortorella to finish the season. Beyond that, there was no guarantee he would be back next year. As for the ongoing rumors of him moving into a managerial position, there was never any validity to those talks, a source said. Whether it be arbitrarily benching players like Sean Couturier last season or defenseman Cam York this season, or going to war with prized forward Matvei Michkov on more than one occasion, the losing clearly broke Tortorella. Yes, he was brought in to steer the team out of a rebuild, but in year 3 and experiencing a massive regression, there were clear signs that John Tortorella was losing steam. He did what he had to do and accomplished what the Flyers wanted of him, but it was time for a change. A new voice was needed, even though the underlying process was solid, and there wasn't much more he could do with a below-average roster and horrid goaltending. Definitely, yeah. And there's a little bit of the end of the article here, which I don't agree with when Anthony DeMarco reaches out here, but definitely probably won't happen, but you never know. As for his successor, Bradshaw will take over on an interim basis, but I doubt that he'll be the guy to run the bench when all is said and done. There have been early speculation about the Canucks bench boss Rick Tocchet, who did interview for the job in 2022 when the Flyers hired Tortorella, but I think those conversations are premature. The Flyers are still committed to rebuilding this thing the right way, as they set out to do nearly 2 years ago, but it will be without the man who was hired in the position before all 3 of his bosses. So Danny Briere is definitely going to be having a chance to hire his head coach, because you got to remember, John Tortorella was hired when Chuck Fletcher was still here, so Danny Briere really never got a chance to hire his head coach. Now this will be Danny Briere's chance to do it, and God forbid, I really hope it's not Rick Tocchet. I hope it's not Rick Tocchet. I know Anthony DeMarco says right here that those talks are very premature, but I really hope it's not Rick Tocchet. He's a very overrated head coach. This is nothing to him, former Flyer grade and all that stuff, had a lot of successful years here in Philadelphia. He's not a good head coach. You could see it on his coaching resume. Yes, he won the Jack Adams Award last season. Miraculously got that Canucks team into the playoff, being one of the better teams in the National Hockey League. But if you look at his entire resume, last year in Vancouver, that was only his second time making the playoffs. The other time he made the playoffs was with the Arizona Coyotes in the bubble. He's been a head coach for a little bit in this league. I believe at least 6-7 years. He's only made the playoffs twice. Now, granted, he was coaching a rebuilding up Arizona Coyotes team that really didn't amount to anything. Now they're in Utah, obviously. Rick Tocchet got fired there, and now he's, from the whole situation with the Vancouver Canucks. Yeah, he got them into the playoffs last year. And I think they're fighting for a playoff spot this year, but there's just been so much drama within that Vancouver organization this year, and a lot of things that it's just not going well there. And this has been more of the same with Rick Tocchet. I just don't think Rick Tocchet is that good of an NHL head coach, and it wouldn't really get me going. I would rather go into a route where I'd prefer a Mike Sullivan from the Pittsburgh Penguins if they were to fire him. Now, with John Tortorella out of the picture, I probably don't see them going after a Mike Sullivan, because Mike Sullivan was a John Tortorella type of guy. He's from the John Tortorella coaching tree, so maybe they don't go that route, and I'm not sure what other route they would go. Do they go to an inexperienced route? Do they go the retread route of hiring a former head coach and everything like that? Do they go to the college route? Maybe you go after David Carl from Denver, who has seen a lot of success with winning 2 national titles and winning 2 gold medals. That would be very intriguing, because the guy wins everywhere he goes. And a lot of Flyers fans, I don't want to go down the college route again. Dave Haxtell, blah, 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 blah. Dave Carl has done 20 billion times more anything than Dave Haxtell did in college. And yes, Dave Haxtell was an up-and-coming coach coming out of North Dakota, but Dave Haxtell never won anything there in North Dakota. Dave Carl's won 2 national titles and 2 gold medals with the World Juniors and Team USA. It's a bit of a different resume right there. I trust David Carl more than a Dave Haxtell. So it's a completely different situation. People are just, scarred by hiring a college coach. Do you hire an assistant coach on a current NHL staff? Do you hire a head coach from the AHL that's seen a lot of success down in the AHL? I have no idea what you do. But we'll see what Danny Briere is going to do this offseason, because it's supposed to be a big offseason for this team. Now, preferably, I prefer this team to be bad again next year, just so they have a chance to go and draft Gavin McKenna. Because Gavin McKenna, have you seen the numbers that he's putting up in the WHL? Have you seen the numbers? I believe he has almost 30 points in his past 5, 6, 7 games. He's putting up historic numbers. He's putting up Crosby-type numbers, McDavid-type numbers. He's going to be the next big thing. I'd prefer to tank for him, even though I don't think that's what the team's going to do next year. They're going to get their high draft pick this year. Whether that's going to be, they're going to move some of these draft picks, whether they're moving some picks for 2026, whether they're moving some of their picks to get, proven talent and all that stuff. I don't know what they're going to do. They get some cap space coming off of the books. I don't know what they're going to do. It's going to be an interesting offseason now. It really is. Getting into the backstretch of this season, hopefully they, still lose a few more games just so they can solidify their draft, stock for the first round pick, their pick. Because right now, I think they're the 5th worst team in the league, but there's so little separation between so many teams, between Pittsburgh, between Seattle, between Buffalo. Nashville's a little bit there, but I don't expect them to pass Nashville as one of the worser teams. But you never know. They play Nashville on Monday, and the Flyers just lose a little bit more. A lot of people are now worried that firing Tortorella will allow this team to go on a run. They won 6-4 last night. They're not going to score 5+, 6+ goals every game and survive their goaltending, allowing 4+. That's just not going to happen. Their goaltending has been horrific all year. Just because John Tortorella is gone, their goaltending is not going to miraculously improve. Yeah, they might score a little more, but just because they feel a little bit more comfortable, they feel a little bit more loose. Maybe yesterday was just the effect of sticking at the Torts. And they go back to where they were basically since then, when Torts was behind the bench, and they lose a bunch. Their goaltending is terrible. They can't score. Possibly could that be that case. But they are playing teams that are, statistically wise, worse than them in the standings, coming up with Buffalo and Nashville. They played Buffalo a couple of times, so if you lose to Buffalo twice, that helped you out there. And Buffalo also has 3 games in hand on you, so it'd be more beneficial for you to lose to them. And Buffalo has been playing a lot better lately, so maybe you will lose to Buffalo. I don't know. But we'll see what happens. Can't guarantee much, but it'll be interesting to say the least. So we do have a voicemail here on the Anytime Hotline. I almost forgot about that. So we might as well get to that. So let's go there right now. Let's get to Sean. Let's see what he has to say about the Flyers firing Torts.
We all knew that John Tortorella pretty much sealed his own fate with those comments. But isn't this the MO on Tortorella, though? I mean, this is a guy who comes into situations, sometimes with teams that aren't the most talented. He gets them to play above and beyond their abilities the first year or two. And then with his style and abrasiveness, the message runs silent after a while. So I think it was a positive for both sides that each side is separated from the other. The one thing I fear, though, is that now that the specter of Attila the Hun is gone, that now the team's going to play free and easy and start winning games. Wins or losses for the Flyers at this point. You know, go out there and play hard and play competitive, but just don't win. You don't want to be picking ninth in the NHL draft on a team that needs to gather as much elite talent as possible. So, again, I think this was inevitable to happen. Credit to Danny Briere for pulling the plug on it early as opposed to late. And we'll see who the Flyers replace them with moving forward. But as I said to you in closing, I was hoping it would be Rocky Thompson to keep the, losing streak strong and proud for us going down the stretch.
Who knows? They scored a power play goal last night. Their first power play goal in like the last 40 attempts or something like that. Their first power play goal in over a month. So maybe Rocky Thompson improves without John Tortorella. I have no idea. Rocky Thompson's not going to be here next year, I would assume that. But on to the fact that, like I said, repeating before this call, I don't think this Flyers team is still going to win that many games going down the stretch. Because if you look at last night's game against Montreal, they won 6-4. This team's not going to score 5+ goals a night and survive their goaltending allowing 4 a night. It's just not going to happen. You allowed 7 goals to Chicago. You allowed 7 goals to Toronto. You allowed 4 goals to Montreal, even though you did win that game. I just don't see it happening. I don't. And with the firepower of offensive talent that Buffalo has, I expect Buffalo to come in here and score a bunch of goals on our goaltending. Nashville, definitely, you never know, because Nashville is not that good this year. Looking at some of the rest of the schedule, actually, I might as well just look at that. Just so maybe I can soften the wound here for Philadelphia Flyers fans that are for the tank the rest of the year. They might lose to Buffalo. They might beat Buffalo. They might lose to Nashville. They might beat Nashville. I have no idea. Montreal, I don't see them beating Montreal twice, and this time's in Montreal. The Rangers are fighting for a playoff spot. I don't see them beating the Rangers, even though they did beat them earlier this year. The Islanders, they always struggle against the Islanders, and they always find ways to go overtime against that team, so who knows what happens there. Ottawa, they're in a playoff spot. Ottawa, they'll probably lose to. Columbus, maybe. Buffalo, maybe. Yeah, their schedule going until the end of the year is definitely not as difficult as it was at some point in March, but I still don't see them winning that many games. And just looking at the standing-wise, just to get a clear cut of where they're at right now in terms of where they're ranking in the league. As of right now, they are the the 5th worst team in the NHL. They are 1 point ahead of the Buffalo Sabres, and the Buffalo Sabres, they have 3 games in hand on us. They're 1 point worse than the Seattle Kraken. The Seattle Kraken have 68 points, and they also have a game in hand on us. They are 2 points worse than Pittsburgh, and they both have the same amount of games. Boston, they have a game in hand on us. They're 2 points ahead of us, but Boston basically looks like they're giving up on the rest of the season. Same thing with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Boston has lost 4 in a row. Pittsburgh's lost 2 in a row, so we'll see how that goes. The Kraken, we're just going to have to rely on them winning games because the Kraken did win both games against the Flyers this year, so they would have the tiebreaker on us. Buffalo, they just got to continue winning. They have a 3-game winning streak. They're 6-4 in their last 10 games, so maybe they just continue winning. I have no idea. Nashville, you just got to pray. You just got to pray. Nashville does have 2 games in hand on us, but they're 5 points separated. So really not realistic right there. It's really, you just got to find a way to land in this top 5. You got to find a way to land in this top 4, top 5, top 6. You got to stay in this range. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see. So that'll do it for today, everybody. I appreciate you all for tuning in as always. So don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section down below. Don't forget to drop a like. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Does me a great deal of service. And also use the code TTPSPORTS, $20 off your first purchase at SEATGEEK. Great deal. Don't pass it up. Appreciate y'all for tuning in tonight, today, whatever time it is posted. And I'll see you next time.